Assalamu alaikum, everybody. We're just getting started. Just going to get started in a moment. We'll let everyone jump on, inshallah, and also getting Clubhouse set.
Which famous person is on that's like crashing our servers?
It must be Elon again.
Alrighty. Okay. All right. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started, inshallah. Alrighty. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Welcome back, everybody, to Wednesday night, to our second of the 6 sessions that we hope to have, inshallah, in preparing us for the month of Ramadan. I hope and pray that everyone's doing okay. And I hope, inshallah, that everybody is in the mental and spiritual state of, at least at this point, thinking about the month of Ramadan and anticipating it, much like you would anticipate a vacation that's a few weeks away. The month of Ramadan is coming, and it is, inshallah, just about a month away from now. So it is something that should be on our minds and our hearts, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us with this month and to give us the ability to make the most of it. Today's session is going to be about the idea that is the crux of the month of Ramadan. That whenever whenever you look in any text or any book or any article or listen to any lecture about Ramadan, you find the ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, what? شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. That this is the month of Ramadan is the month in which the Quran was revealed. هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. That this Quran was meant to be a guide for all of humanity, for all of humankind, and was meant to be a guide of clear proofs for a criteria, for a furqan, for people to be able to know right from wrong. Okay, so this is like the entirety of the description of the month of Ramadan, is beginning with the idea that this was a month in which the Quran was revealed. So you hear this a lot during khutbahs, and you hear this concept a lot during different discussions about the month of Ramadan, that this is the month of Quran, that this is the month where we need to read Quran. That one of the reasons why Tarawih prayer is so important is because it allows everybody to engage with the Quran. But the question that nobody really seems to get to or ask or get the answer to, I should say, is number one, what does it mean to have a relationship with the Quran? So when a sheikh or a sheikha or an ustad or an ustada comes on to Instagram and tells everybody that everybody needs to have a better relationship with the Quran, the real question is, like, what does that mean? What does it mean to have a better relationship with the Quran? And number two is, if I want to have that relationship, how do I get there? How do I go from wanting this relationship with the Quran to also being able to, get to that station that I've been so trying to get to, but I just can't seem to figure out a way to get there. So when you look at the description of the month of Ramadan in regards to the Quran, and you do a little bit of research and some reading in the books of, tazkiyah, purification of the heart, and the books talking about how the Sahaba and, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ and some of the Salaf, how they used to engage with the Quran. One common, reflection or wisdom that you see in regards to how the Quran and Ramadan are connected is that there are some very obvious connections. We know first and foremost, as Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, that it is the month in which the Quran was revealed. We know that the first revelation, the beginning of Wahi, in which Jibreel came to the Prophet ﷺ in the cave of Hira, we know that that occurred on what we know now to be the Laylatul Qadr, the night of power, the night of destiny. And we know that that's also something that occurs in the last 10 nights of Ramadan. So there's a few connections that are a little bit more apparent than others. But some of the scholars of Tazkiyah, they've mentioned some really amazing reflections that I wanted to share with you as far as what the month of Ramadan does to you in order to prepare you to engage with the Quran. The first thing that they say is they say that this month, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we talked about this in the last session, He ordains and obligates certain actions and certain requirements that are never done throughout the entire year. Okay, so we talk about, for example, fasting. That's one of the obligations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mandates upon us, that, you know, if somebody is healthy and able and of age, that they should not eat or drink during the daylight hours, they should not get intimate with their spouse during the daylight hours, etc. Right? So it's interesting, right? Because subhanAllah, when you think about eating, when you think about drinking, when you think about your normal day-to-day, these are things that you would define as a necessity. Because if you don't eat, if you don't drink, you're going to feel this sense of weakness, this sense of lethargy, this sense of, maybe even just general tiredness, this malaise. You're going to just kind of feel out of it because you're hungry and because your body wants food. And ultimately, when you are reduced to that state, to like the minimal state that you should be in, the minimal state that you can exist in, barely having had any food for hours and hours, barely having any water for hours and hours, then your entire mindset of what is necessity and what is a distraction becomes completely different. Okay? So if you haven't eaten all day and it's getting close to Maghrib time and one of your friends tells you, hey, let's go watch a movie, your priority at that moment is not the movie, right? If it's 30 minutes away from when you can eat after you have not been able to eat all day, and your friend says, let's go to Topgolf, your priority is not to go hang out with your friend, right? Your priority is to make sure that you get some food and some water into your system because you've been, 12, 14, 16 hours even without it. So the scholars, they talk about this and they say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He clears all the fog of distraction away from us. He clears all that fog away. When you're sitting during a normal day, okay, today is March 10th. When you're sitting during a normal day and you finished all the work that you're supposed to do at work and you're sitting on your computer and you're browsing, right, and an ad pops up for 30% off at one of your favorite stores, 30% off this, 30% off that. You click on that ad and you start to scroll and you start to look, and it's almost like this digital window shopping. Or you might even go to the mall and you might actually do some window shopping, right? And you do these things, and the reason why you do them is because you have the luxury of focus. You have the luxury of being able to take your priority off of food, off of drink, off of safety, off of electricity, off of all of these other things, and you can engage in prioritizing this luxury, which is shopping for clothes or for technology or whatever. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removes those comforts from your life, when He takes away those things, the food and the drink, and for some people in Ramadan, sleep, because they try to pray as much as they can in the masjid and even at home, then all of a sudden your entire list of priorities gets much shorter. The list of things that you value become a lot more specific, and you start to really realize the reality of this life. Shopping is not so much an important object or important action for you to do anymore in the month of Ramadan. What movies you're going to watch, your Netflix list for the next 2 weeks is not as important anymore. What's important for you is, number one, right, on the surface level, to eat and drink because you're hungry. But when you ask yourself, why am I doing this to myself? What's important for you then becomes, how am I benefiting from this eating and from this fasting? The Prophet ﷺ, he said that it's such a shame that some people during the month of Ramadan, that they will fast, they will stay away from food and drink, and they will gain nothing but hunger and thirst. And he said they will stand and pray all night and they will gain nothing but tiredness. So some of these activities that we do during this month, it doesn't guarantee that we're gaining something from it unless we take an opportunity to take advantage of that. So what does Ibn al-Qayyim say? Ibn al-Qayyim, he says that Ramadan, the fasting of Ramadan, preps your heart for the Quran. Isn't that amazing? Like Ramadan, the action of giving up food and drink, it makes it so that your heart is not distracted by all of the dunya that's out there, so that when you open up the Quran, you don't just read it for 30 seconds and then start thinking about, oh, what should I go buy at the mall? Or I wonder if there's a sale, or I wonder if this, or I wonder if that, right? Ramadan basically shrinks down your ego and shrinks down your desires to the point where your entire focus is shifted from this life to the next life, right? Because there's no other reason why somebody would starve themselves from food and drink for the entire day besides the next life. So when you are engaging in this month, it is a unique opportunity for a person to engage in the Ramadan. Basically what they say, the Quran you read during this month is not like the Quran you read the rest of the year. It's very different because your mind is in a different place. Your heart is in a different place. And so that's the first connection that we have, that this month is a unique opportunity. And if you think about it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala designated and chose this month to be the month in which he sent the Quran. So surely there's something unique about this season. You know, everybody always talks about, for people who grew up in the West, people who grew up in America, they talk about how like different seasons throughout the year get them emotionally in a different place. You know, like during end of November, during like that Thanksgiving break, people get, you know, all festive for family and they want to eat like all these warm, hearty foods because that's what you grew up around that season, right? Right or wrong, it was the reality. It was the soil that you were planted in. And then so many Muslims feel this guilt because during the winter time, especially if they live in a place where it snows, all these lights are out, the country becomes more festive, end of December, and that Christmas holiday for a lot of people, it's synonymous with like festivity, right? And it's interesting, subhanAllah, because those seasons are defined by those feelings. But the month of Ramadan, for us, has yet to become defined as a connected month to the Quran. Like that should be the month of Quran. That should be the month where, that's why Allah Ta'ala said, Shahr Ramadan alladhi unzila fil Quran. That this is the month where the Quran was sent. Just like you get this festivity during certain parts of the year, maybe it's your anniversary, maybe it's your birthday, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, and you feel a certain way. When Ramadan approaches, the heart of the believer needs to be like, okay, it's time for me to put away everything else that I'm reading, everything else that I'm listening to, everything else that I'm watching, because the opportunity that I have in this month is so unique that I don't know if I'm going to have this again. I don't know if I'm going to be able to take advantage of this again. So that's number one. Okay. This month prepares your heart for the Quran. Now, what is the purpose of the Quran? What is the purpose of this book? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls this Quran many different names in the Quran, and we learn about the purpose of the Quran by these names. Number one is, and these are some of the names that Allah ta'ala calls it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he refers to the Quran as Al-Furqan. He refers to it as the criterion, right? The thing that separates, the thing that separates. What is this meaning? What does this name give us in terms of its meaning? Well, the Quran, or Al-Furqan, the criterion, it's our rubric for life. It's like a manual, right? Criterion is kind of a Shakespearean word. It's our manual. It's our living manual. If you ever want to know, if you ever want to think about whether or not something is right or wrong, the Quran is going to be able to guide your decision. Point blank, right? No, there's no exception to that rule. The Quran will be able to guide your decision in any situation. That's what the Furqan is. Al-Dhikr, Allah Ta'ala calls it Al-Dhikr, the remembrance or the reminder. Why? Because one of the primary functions of the Quran is not just to teach us when we don't know something, but to remind us when we forget. Because the human being ultimately is a creation that forgets. We forget things very much. And just because you forget does not make you a bad person. But refusing to remember or be reminded is what can make us a bad person. Forgetting does not make one a bad person. Refusing to be reminded is what makes someone or pushes someone towards the bad side of that scale. So the Quran is the thing that will remind you. You know, how many times have you and I been in a certain situation in our life and it just seemed like it was a really bad spot? It was a dead end, okay? And how many times did we hear something or see something on our social media or listen to a lecture or just listen to like our parents or our friends mention something from the Quran? Maybe they didn't say it in Arabic. Maybe they didn't give us the citation. Maybe they didn't give us like some sort of specific, you know, reference, but they said, you know, remember Allah tells us in the Quran to be patient, that Allah is with those who are patient. And you're in that moment in your life when like, you're not being patient at all. You're being very flustered. Things are going kind of all over the place. And this person comes to you and they tell you what? Remember, Allah Ta'ala God Almighty in the Quran reminds us to be patient. And all of a sudden, what happens? It's like this mini miracle. Your heart starts to feel at rest. There have been so many times where people have come to me with like certain problems, and I'm trying to find the perfect solution. I'm trying to figure out in my head, like, okay, what can I give them that's perfect? And then that person comes back like a week later, a month later, and they say, I was so overwhelmed by that problem. But then like my cousin or my aunt or my dadi, my grandma, somebody told me, that just trust in Allah, because sometimes things happen. Allah says in the Quran that you don't love, but it's good for you. And you're like, and that person was like, and that was my answer. And I was sat there so humiliated and embarrassed, like, man, why did I depend on myself to find the answer when the reminder was there in the Quran the whole time, right? So az-zikr is the name that Allah Ta'ala gives the Quran, and that name teaches us that it is not just an educator, but it is a reminder. At-tanzil, Allah Ta'ala refers to the book as tanzil, that this is something that was sent down, right? And in another verse we're going to talk about, he's going to use it as a verb. Sent down from where? From the heavens. This book is not like any other book. This message is not like any other message. That's why during the month of Ramadan, you put stuff away, because this is a very unique and rare opportunity. So like Netflix, as nice as it is not divine, okay? Other books, as good as they might be, are not divine. But this book was revealed and sent down from the heavens, from Allah himself. This is something that's unlike any other book. It's like any other exercise or activity, right? And one of the last, Allah Ta'ala calls it an-nur, the light. What does light do? Light gives you the ability to differentiate between what is safe and what is dangerous. When somebody is scared in the dark, it's primarily because they don't know what's there. Light is what gives them the ability to see. It takes fear away. Light takes that fear away from the heart of a person. Light also allows you to navigate safely between point A and point B. If I'm walking somewhere and the lights turn off, if I'm in like a big hall or a big room and the lights turn off, what do? I stop moving completely. I stop moving. And that's why sometimes when we disconnect ourselves from the Quran, we feel like life is just kind of like stuck. I'm in the same place. Well, partially because you don't have the light to guide you to the next step. You know what I mean? So an-nur is another name. The last one that I want to give before we move on is this beautiful verse from Surah Al-Isra. This is chapter number 17, verse 82. Allah Ta'ala says, وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah calls the Quran two things here. He says, and we sent down this Quran, مَا هُوَ, that it is absolutely and only this. Like, if you're looking for these two traits, you will find it in this book. Number one is ash-shifa. Shifa means a cure, a remedy for an ailment, right? Shifa is interesting because when we think of cures or remedies for ailments, we typically think of what? We think of physical ailments. We think of remedies of a physical nature. Now, we actually believe in Islam, we have a hadith that prove this, authenticated narrations from the Prophet ﷺ, that it is possible that a person can utilize the Quran as a means of as a part of physical care, right? Reading Surah Al-Fatiha and blowing over some water as a portion of ruqyah, doing ruqyah over water, reading Surah Al-Fatiha 7 times on the ailing body part of a person. These are methods in which the Quran functions as a physical shifa. But what else is a shifa from the Quran is that it is a spiritual and even emotional shifa. It is a cure, not just individually, not on a micro level, but on a societal, on a macro level, that the Quran provides solutions. And this is what Malcolm X, rahimahullah, may Allah Ta'ala bless him, may Allah Ta'ala grant him Jannah with the Prophet ﷺ in the highest level, Ameen. This is what Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X said. He said that the solution to the problem of racism is found in the Quran. That doesn't mean that Muslims did it, by the way. That doesn't mean that Muslims are providing the solution. He said it's found in Islam. It's found in the Quran, right? So the solution to the problem that I'm going through can be given to me in the Quran. Maybe it's not specific. Maybe it's not like given to me exactly how I'm suffering it. But if I am a person who's wise, the ingredients are all there. I can use them, right? If I'm a person who is open-minded, the ingredients are all there. I can use them. right? I can use them to benefit. And then Allah Ta'ala says, وَرَحْمَةٌ, and it is rahmah, it is mercy. That all of these things, if you look at the Quran, all the benefits it gives you, it is truly a mercy in the life of a person. And this is unfortunately a little bit of a sidebar tangent here. It's unfortunately one of the struggles that we have in the ummah today, is that unfortunately the Quran was not introduced as a mercy. It was not introduced as dark or as light. It was not introduced as it was not introduced as cure, right? It was introduced as, unfortunately, maybe in a very rigid, in a very difficult, in a very, someone screaming or someone hitting or someone using it as punishment. And this is not appropriate. It's not appropriate. And I hope that if you've gone through that yourself, that I hope that you're able to give it a second chance. And I hope you're able to, inshallah, seek, strength through those moments and give it a second chance, because it wasn't the Quran that was abusive. The Quran in that moment was used as abuse. And we need to rededicate and reform that entire understanding of what the Quran should be. So these are some of the names that Allah Ta'ala used when he talked about the Quran, and why, again, it's important for us to establish a relationship with the Quran. Now, how do we establish a relationship with the Quran? Let's talk about that. Okay, number one, the Quran is our guide. It is very difficult for a person to get through any scenario without a guide. Does that mean that it's impossible? No. You might, if you come across a fork in the road, if you come across a situation where you're driving somewhere, you may be able to pick the right route once in a while, right? You may be able to get lucky, coincidentally, take the right turn that was meant to be there, right? The correct turn. But in order for a person to have confidence and to have this understanding and trust that what they're doing is correct, especially in moments when they doubt themselves, then a connection with the Quran is absolutely essential. It's not secondary. It's primary. It is something that is absolutely necessary. Okay, because it is a guide. Now we hear stories of these great salaf. We hear stories of these great people of how they were interacted with the Quran. There's the story of Imam al-Shafi'i, who finished the Quran every 3 days. There's a story of Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu, who read the Quran during an entire prayer. There's just these amazing stories that people tell, oh, so-and-so used to finish the Quran every 2 nights, every 3 nights, every week they would finish the Quran. And we read these stories or we hear them in lectures, and I'm not going to lie, right? I distinctly remember hearing them, and the first thing that I think to myself when I hear these stories is, I used to, when I was a kid, be like, that's completely not true. That's not possible. And then when I started to develop better appreciation for the authentic chains that gave us this information, and I knew that they were true, then what I started to do was I started to say, that's for them, not for me. There's no way that I can accomplish those goals. Quran every 3 nights, a Quran every week, a Quran in 1 day, there's no way. And I'll tell you something that's amazing to me, subhanAllah. This happened to me 3 years ago. I was sitting on an airplane and I was flying to Hajj, and I sat next to a well-known scholar here in from the 90s, Sheikh Adli. He's actually one of his sons is one of our students at Qalam Seminary. So I sat next to Sheikh Adli, and he's an elderly Egyptian man, and he had a little Quran with him, like a little mushaf, okay? Like most people have something like this at home, this copy of the Quran. I'm holding it up for the Instagram and Facebook, but if you're on Clubhouse, you know what I'm talking about, like the little mushaf that people have. And he was holding this, and he was just toward the very beginning. He was in the very beginning, and we were flying from, I want to say Houston. We were either flying from Houston or Dallas, I forget. And it was like a 13-hour flight, okay? And he hadn't done more than 20 pages. And subhanAllah, during that entire flight, I was really tired, so I was kind of falling in and out of sleep. I was trying to read a little bit, listen a little bit, but I was generally very exhausted. And every time I woke up, I noticed that he had covered another massive chunk of the Quran. That he had covered a massive chunk of it, right? And I felt embarrassed, because some of the flight I was watching some TV, I'm not going to lie. Some of the flight I was watching some downloaded movies, halal, alhamdulillah, but I was watching them. And every time I would look over at him, he would have covered another huge chunk of pages, right? And then finally, as we were landing, I saw that he was starting the 29th juz, he was almost done. And he said to himself, he said to me, I looked at him and he noticed, and he said to me like, oh yeah, like inshallah, hopefully I'll be able to finish before we make it for Hajj, before we get to Mecca. And I was just in disbelief. This was the first time that I've ever witnessed in my entire life somebody in front of my eyes literally being able to do this. And he's not someone that's going to flip through pages and skip through. He's reading every single letter, every single line and letter of this Mus'haf. So it's possible. Now, what was the difference? How was this person able to do this? And is this something that we should expect of ourselves? Well, the answer to the last question is probably not, right? We should make sure that whatever connection we have with the Quran is, number one, realistic, number two, sustainable, and number three, meaningful. Okay, those are the three things that I want everyone to understand: realistic, sustainable, and meaningful. Meaning what? We have to have a relationship with the Quran, but we want to make sure that it's not just like a quick 1 to 2 week thing or a 3 week thing and then we fall off again. Want to make sure that it's something sustainable. Realistic meaning what? That contributes directly to the sustainability. If it's not realistic, then you're not going to be able to keep it up. And number three is meaningful. And this is something actually that I read here in one of the statements of Ibn Abbas. Ibn Abbas, he said that I would much rather spend one night reading one surah of Quran and thinking about it and reflecting on it. He said, it's more beloved to me than to spend one night in reflection, finding meaning in what I've recited. أحب إلي من أقرأ القرآن حضرمة. Rather than reading the Quran like really quickly on my tongue, just trying to finish, right? And maybe you guys have heard or been at a masjid or experienced a space where the Quran was being recited super fast, super quickly. And that's not the purpose of how the Quran was meant to be recited. That's not the purpose of how it was meant to be given. وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا. Allah Ta'ala says, and recite the Quran with a measured, nice, rhythmic tone. Okay? Because it's meant to be understood. So those three things, realistic, sustainable, and number three was what? We want to make sure that it's meaningful. That whatever you read, you have to be able to engage with it. You have to be able to think about it. And that engagement is what's going to keep you coming back. That's what's going to make it a shifa. That's what's going to make it a nur. That's what's going to make it al-huda, the thing that guides you, that cures you, that gives you illumination in dark times when you understand and think about it. Okay? So that's number two. The next point that I wanted to make when it comes to the Quran is that many of us, we hear these stories of these great, great things, just like the story I told you, and we feel overwhelmed and intimidated, and we think to ourselves that I can never do this. Okay? But we have to understand a couple things. Number one, the Quran itself is not just about reading and studying and deriving rulings. Okay, the Quran itself is not like reading for an exam. It's not like studying for an exam. A lot of times, we have the Quran in our house, but we don't touch it all year long because we think that the Quran is like time specific or moment specific. Like we read it when someone gets married, we read it when someone has a baby, we read it when someone buys a house, and that's it. And other than that, we wrap it up, we put it on the shelf, we make it look very nice, right? We respect it, no doubt. We respect the Quran, but it's interesting because this Quran has become almost like a holy symbol rather than something that was like very near and dear, something that was meant to be interacted with on a daily basis. We almost use it more like an encyclopedia than we use it like a daily journal in our life, right? The Quran is meant to be more like a daily journal in your life than it's meant to be an encyclopedia. I get really, really disappointed in myself and in when I see, not other people, but when I see I get disappointed in general in myself first and foremost. And also when I see this culture that we are all part of, where people are looking for answers to these problems. And there's so many books out there that are meant to be like daily readers, 365 points, 365 reminders or pages. And they're good. It's nice to have those. But in reality, those reminders, those readers are nothing more than the thoughts and wisdoms of another human being, just like you and I. But we have here with us this book, this Quran that was, sent down from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the heavens. And it contains priceless guidance in it that if a person were to think about it and to really, really ponder over it. And again, you don't have to read 20, 30 pages a day. I'm talking about reading maybe 1, 3, 5 verses a day, half a page. You know what I mean? It's like half a page. It's like 5 verses. You read that and you think about it, and you will have all the self-help in terms of that spiritual growth that you need if you give it a shot, right? If you give it a shot. So don't think of the Quran as something that's just an encyclopedia that you just derive rulings from. Think of the Quran as something that you can read and you can think about and you can process and you can even interpret your own wisdoms from, right? This is a very, very important distinction for everybody. You can't derive rulings from it without training. Just like a person medically who is not trained should not be, prescribing medicine or diagnosing people if there's no training, right? But a person who has a body, has organs, has, things to take care of in their life, they can read general medical information and think about how it applies to them. Okay? So a person can know, what cholesterol is bad for your heart. Cholesterol is not good for your heart. And a doctor can be a person that can tell someone, okay, you have high cholesterol. Okay, you have a really risky heart condition. Okay, that's a doctor's job with training and with experience. But an average person like me, I can understand that cholesterol, too much cholesterol is not good for my heart. And I can look at my own life. I can look at the food that I'm eating. I can look at the food that's in my fridge, that's on my plate. And I can say, Abdurrahman, I don't know specifically about my relationship with cholesterol in a number sense. I don't know what my numbers say. But I do know that when I think about my day-to-day, when I think about my meal to meal, and, every week that I go through, that it seems like I'm eating a lot of cholesterol. It seems like I'm having a lot of this meat and a lot of these fats and a lot of this. Maybe I need to rethink the way that I'm eating, right? And I need to make these small changes. That's the exact same way that every single person can engage with the Quran. Sure, can I go to the Quran and start to derive rulings and figure out what is halal, what is haram? No, I can't, right? Without training, that's not, if you're trained, yes, that is something that trained, scholars, ulama, fuqaha can do. But can I read the Quran and can I reflect on it? Yeah, man, Allah Ta'ala even says that. He says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبُّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَوْ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ أَقْفَالُهَا. He says, won't they think about the Quran? Won't they ponder and reflect upon the Quran? Or is it the case that on their hearts they have locks? So the inability and the lack of willingness to ponder the Quran is actually an indication that the heart is not interested, that the heart is not there. So this month, right, Allah Ta'ala is going to grant us the gift of fasting, inshallah, the month of Ramadan. That's going to reduce all of our distractions and all of our desires for the dunya. And we are going to have our heart being emptied out like a vessel that's being cleaned, like a cup that's being scrubbed. The heart is going to be emptied out. What are we going to choose to fill that heart with? That is ultimately the question. What is it that we're going to choose to fill that heart with? And what the Quran tells us, what the Hadith tell us, is that this month is meant to be a month in which we have that relationship where we fill our hearts with the Quran. So here's what I'm going to tell you guys. 3 tips, inshallah. 3 tips on how to build this relationship. Number 1 is all about sequence. It's all about sequence. I can't give you an exact citation, but I remember engaging in some, reading about productivity, how to be a productive person, okay? And shout out to Brother Muhammad Faris from productivemuslim.com. They do great work on fusing the spirituality with productivity and giving us great, Muslim reminders about being productive and efficient while at the same time growing our spiritual state. So if you want to check out their website, productivemuslim.com, I was not paid for this. So I really do support the work they do, mashallah. So I was reading up on productivity and I was trying to really, as you start to get more busy in life, whether it's, job, whether it's friends, family, kids, whatever, like everyone's got a laundry list of things that they got to do. And time is of the essence, right? Time is something that, you finish your day and you wonder how it was the case that 24 hours has already gone by, right? And I looked at some tips on productivity and some different mindset goals and things like that. And one thing that I consistently came across when I was doing some reading and some listening to some of these people who study, human psychology and how people work, is they said that one of the most important things a person can do is they can sequence the most important tasks they have for the first thing that they do in the day. They can sequence their day. So I don't know how many of you guys do this, But if you take like a list of things that you have to do, let's say there's 3 things that are super critical you have to do today, right? You have to submit your taxes, you have to pay your bills, and you have to go to the grocery store. Okay, those 3 things. A lot of times we will sequence those things based off of comfort or convenience. And what ends up happening is procrastination gets the best of us, and we end up doing those things that we are most comfortable with, and we end up leaving those things that we are least comfortable with, or the things that are most inconvenient, and we do not prioritize them accordingly. And what ends up happening, they get pushed next day, the day after, the day after, the day after. So what I read, and it really benefited me, was do things first that are the most important, so long as, oops, sorry, my adhan, so long as those things don't disrupt the rest of your day, right? So for example, in the example I gave about paying or submitting your taxes, right? And then paying your electricity bill and then going grocery shopping, okay? I love grocery shopping. I love going to the grocery store. If you can't tell, I love it. So for me, I would think to myself, like, okay, that's something that I might want to do first. And then I'll come home and then I'll pay the bill, my water bill or whatever, my electricity bill. And then I'll email my accountant and be like, yeah, let's go ahead and submit my taxes. And that's something that, I don't want to get done. I don't want to do. But if I think about what has a deadline, what is important to me, what has consequences to me, to my family, then I would actually probably, in most cases, unless we have no groceries at home at all, I would reframe my entire day around making sure that I woke up and that I emailed my accountant and took care of that situation with the IRS right away. Why? Because that was the most critical thing. And then after that, maybe I would quickly go ahead and take care of my water bill or electricity bill because I don't want to forget and get it shut off. And then I can figure out a way or a time to get my groceries taken care of, because that's something that I want to do. As my motivation wanes throughout the day, I'm not going to feel like I'm going to let that go, right? But most of us, when it comes to spiritual motivation, what do we accomplish? We oftentimes leave so much of our spiritual actions to the end of the time. Think about, like, does anybody here pray Dhuhr or Asr or Maghrib right when or Isha? Maghrib is kind of like, obviously, it has its own sort of like shorter time. But does anyone here pray Dhuhr, Asr, or Isha right at the time when it comes in? Like immediately? Very few people. But interestingly enough, Imam al-Ghazali, when he talks about making prayer more enjoyable, making prayer something that's less stressful and less of a burden on people, one thing he says? He says, remove distractions, right? He says, don't pray in a crowded room, don't pray. And he says all that. So Ramadan removes our distractions. And then you know what he says? He says, pray right when the time comes in. Pray as soon as you can when the time comes in, right? Like, don't delay. Don't delay prayer mindlessly. Why? Because then every moment that passes by, it's going to become a burden. So why don't most of us have a relationship with the Quran that is daily? Is because we don't start our day with it. Quite frankly, we don't start our day with it, right? If we started our day with the Quran, even 5 minutes, guys, you know how long 5 minutes is? 300 seconds. I want you guys, and I'll do this too. Next time you open up TikTok or Instagram, I want you to set a timer for 5 minutes, and I want to see how quickly it goes by. How quickly 5 minutes just flies by when we're on our social media, or when you're watching something, when you're watching the show that you like, just set a timer for 5 minutes. You don't have to stop after that. I'm not telling you to stop. I'm just saying, just for context, understanding how quickly that stuff flies, right? Now, translate that over to Quran, and the idea of reading 5 minutes almost feels embarrassing. Like, that's all I'm going to do? That's all I want to do? So number one is sequence, making sure that you establish the Quran as the first thing that you do. There's a brother that I love dearly, somebody that I look up to immensely. And I'll tell you something, he's not the most knowledgeable person. He's not like super, super duper pious. Okay. He's not like he's not like the grand scholar of any particular place. But you know what I love about this guy? He always, and he's been through some interesting, tough times. He always has such reliance on Allah, such trust in Allah. It's unreal. I've never seen somebody with such rock solid relationship with Allah. I've never seen it, right? And, he's just one of the community members, somebody that I know, that I spend time with. So I remember a couple of years back, he was going through a situation. He's a physician, and he was going through like a situation. He wasn't being sued, but he was part of like not a loss. I guess, yeah, they were suing the hospital, and he was one of the guys there. Either way, he was at risk for some sort of penalty. He wasn't going to get like his license taken away or whatever. I think he was the supervising doctor overnight, and something tragic happened, and he was responsible. So anyways, so I remember like, this brother came to me, and he asked me for advice. How do I handle this? I'm really worried. This lawsuit is very scary, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't even know. Like the person, literally, the tragedy, the person passed away like right when I came in for my shift. So I didn't even know like what was happening. Like it caught me off guard, and this is the case. And I kind of gave him some advice, but then I said, obviously, inshallah, Allah Ta'ala will defend you, and you're telling the truth, and he won't deal with you unjustly, et cetera. Don't worry about it. And subhanAllah, things went well. And one thing I noticed about him was that he was always maintaining like such trust in Allah. So later on, a few days later, the court case is dismissed. Like nothing happens to him. Alhamdulillah, nothing bad happened to him. And I spoke to his wife, and we were catching up about that whole situation. And his wife said to me that I gave him some du'as to read, and he read them, right, and all that. But his wife said to me, one of the reasons why his heart never shook was because every morning since we've been married, since I've known him and we've been living together and all this kind of stuff, every morning with his tea, he always goes and he looks at some Quran. He takes some Quran and he looks. This guy does not know how to read Arabic. Okay, he's not like the most fluent. He's not like doesn't know how to translate. That's for sure. Okay, but he takes his translation. He takes his translation of the Quran, this one that I have here, and he just opens it up and he starts to read. And he gives it 5 to 10 minutes. He has his chai and his cake rusk, and he gives the Quran 5 to 10 minutes every morning before he goes to work, and he goes to work. And subhanAllah, amongst other things that he did, du'as and sadaqah and things like that, he said that he felt like his relationship with Allah would not let him down. And this is what we're talking about. When you prioritize Allah by sequencing Allah first, then the fruit of that sequence, of that prioritization, is Allah gives you thabat. He gives you firmness and strength in your heart when times get tough, when the waves get choppy. It's not about the waves getting choppy or not. They will get choppy. The waves will be big, but it's about how strong your boat is. It's about how strong your vessel is, and whether or not you'll be able to withstand the waves crashing upon you, right? The waves will come to everybody, but not everyone's ready to take that. So prioritizing, number one, is sequencing, okay? Number two, in order to build a relationship with the Quran. So first tip I'm going to give everybody tonight, sequence. When do you read the Quran? And if your answer is, well, I'll read it later at night, I will be very impressed if a person is able to, after their entire day, consistently, day after day after day after day, without missing, I will be very impressed that a person will be able to engage with the Quran in the evening, because it's human nature, exhaustion, you're being tired. There's something different about engaging with something first thing in the morning. That's why Fajr is like one of the most powerful prayers, because it's first thing when you wake up in the morning, okay? So number one is sequence. Number two, the second thing that people need to understand is that the Quran is meant to be transformative. Why does a person stop going to the gym? Because they don't notice results. Why does a person keep going to the gym? Because they notice results. When I notice results, okay, when I invest my money with somebody and I notice results, my investment is giving me a great return, then I keep going to that person, okay? When I go to a restaurant and the chef keeps putting out great food, I go back, okay? The reason why I stop doing something is because I don't see results. I don't feel results, okay? So the second thing is we have to not just engage with the Quran in a ceremonial kind of way, in a way that is just formal, but we have to engage with it in a way where we do see the results. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ, that I was sent to perfect noble character. And we know the Prophet ﷺ was also sent to give us the Quran. What does that mean? It means that the Quran was meant to perfect our character. It was meant to perfect our character. And there's a narration here that I was just reading with Sheikh Abdul Nasser earlier, where Ibn Mas'ud, he actually describes the person who engages with the Quran, and he actually prohibits them from a few different qualities. It's very interesting. Listen to this. Ibn Mas'ud, he says that وَلَا يَنْبَغِي لِحَامِلِ الْقُرْآنِ, that it is absolutely necessary that when a person who carries the Quran, here I might be talking more so about like the Hafiz, but anybody that carries the book and reads it and wants to engage with the Quran, أن يكون جافيا ولا غافلا ولا صخابا ولا صياحا ولا حديدا. He prohibits this person from having 5 characteristics. Number 1 is, he says, this person cannot be jafian, which is like rude and rough. All right, this person cannot be uncouth and unrefined and be like put people off. No, the person cannot do that. Number 2 is that this person cannot be negligent. All right, it's a horrible trait to forget people, to forget important things about people, to not say salam to people, to not check up on people, to be just completely narcissistic, all about yourself, vain, vanity. That's ghafla. All right, and a person who engages with the Quran cannot be like that. Number 3, he says the person cannot be sakhab, and Shaykh Abdul Nasser translated this as rowdy. The person cannot be rowdy. They cannot be somebody who acts out of place. Okay? Well, sayyahan, the person who raises their voice, who yells, who screams at people, right? And number 5, wahadidan, wala hadidan. The person cannot be overly stern on people, overly strong. Literally, hadid means iron. The person cannot be so heavy and weighty on people. They can't be so stern on them. This is how Abdullah ibn Mas'ud described and prohibited people who engage with the Quran from having these 5 traits. Okay, now, I hate to do this because it's embarrassing, but think back to sometimes the people that we have associated with Quran in our life and think about some of those traits. If you are lucky, if you are in a good spot, your Quran teacher did not have these traits. I can say that about Miss Mahari, my Quran teacher from Islamic Foundation in Villa Park. She made us love the Quran because the way she was, the way she treated us. She was a Syrian woman. She treated us like her own children. She would bake for us, cook for us. She would love us. If we made mistakes, she would correct us gently. She was like our own mother, right? And she did not have these traits whatsoever. But from the stories that I hear, from the experiences that I've heard, children, adults, whoever, they've associated learning Quran with horrible traits of character. And Ibn Mas'ud, he says that this Quran should not be in the same heart as the person who does this. It's proof that this person has not learned what the Quran is saying. They're carrying it physically, but they have not learned. As the Prophet ﷺ described a group of people, he said that they recite the Quran, but it doesn't go past their throat. It doesn't penetrate their heart. So the first thing is sequence. Number 2 is making sure that you do develop and you do feel inspired to act upon what you're reading. How do you do that? The Quran tells you to be patient. When you feel yourself being impatient and being hasty and being overly concerned about something that you've already put your effort into, then remind yourself, Abdurrahman, you read yesterday the verse where Allah Ta'ala reminded you to be patient and to persevere and to be strong. Abdurrahman, trust in Allah. Things will get done. And when you remind yourself of that, that fruit of patience will then start to bear more fruit. When you realize that situation was solved by your patience, guess what? The next time something happens to you, you're going to be like, I got this. I can handle it. Last time this happened, the Quran told me to be patient. It turned out okay. I got this. And you're going to be more patient than you ever thought you could have been in your entire life. Okay? Number 1, sequence. Number 2, what value, what change is it causing to you? And number 3 is the value of the Quran. What value does this book have? If you think about the most valuable thing you have in your life, the reality is not many people would say the Quran. If I asked you, what is the most valuable thing you own? Not many people would say the Quran. Some people would go more sentimental. Maybe they would say, like, my grandmother gave me some jewelry that was very important to her. Maybe some people would say my wedding ring. Maybe some people would say our home because my whole family has memories in it. Maybe some people would say my car because I worked so hard and it was the first thing that I bought with my own money. maybe some people would say, go through this example by yourself. What's the most valuable thing you own? Not many people would say the Quran, right? And this isn't meant to be some sort of like guilt trip or anything, but this is just a reality, right? The moment that the Quran becomes the most valuable thing that we have is the moment that we start to benefit from it more than we ever have before. If we say to ourselves, you know what, Abdurrahman, everything else is valuable to me. I do have other things of value for sure, but there's nothing more valuable to me than the message that Allah sent to me. And this is something Shaykh Abdul Nasser said so beautifully to me, man. He said, this is the speech of Allah, kalam Allah. It's the speech of Allah. Would you not want to listen to that? If you see somebody talking to somebody else, if you're like at a restaurant or a coffee shop and you see two people together and one person is talking and the other person is just like looking around, not acknowledging, ignoring them, how would you feel? You would be embarrassed, right? You'd be disappointed. Like, why is that person not even listening? And I can't help but wonder how many times I've done that with the Quran to me. Allah is speaking to me and I'm just looking around at everything else. My eyes are more taken by the glitter and the glam of random objects of the dunya instead of the fact that Allah sent this message and He allowed my heart to be receptive to it. So the minute and the moment that we decide that this book is the most valuable thing, then we will understand that how much more of an impact it will have on our life. There's one example of this. We pay a lot of money for a lot of things, right? People pay a lot of money for a lot of things. Haircuts, clothes, cars, landscaping, televisions, like you name it, okay? And it's not haram. It's not haram to buy a TV as long as you're not going to do haram things with it. It's not haram to get a haircut, to pay for a haircut. Ahad, batul, not haram to pay for a haircut. It's not haram to buy nice clothes. It's not haram to do these things. But what's crazy is that the money that we spend on something tells us a lot about what we love. If I spend money on something, then that's an indication that I love that thing, right? When's the last time we spent money on like a really nice copy of the Quran that we would be proud to leave and have it next to us on our desk? When's the last time we spent some money on a nice set of tafsir in English that we can understand? When's the last time, like we see the price tag, oh, this copy of Quran is like $30 on Amazon. It's nice, hardcover, glossy pages. Like, is there something cheaper? Is there something that I can get for free? I can just read it online, right? It's not about it being an obligation to buy a Quran. That's not what I'm talking about here. It's not an obligation to purchase a Quran, but it is an indication of something, isn't it? It is an indication. And when things are nice, when things are well done, when things are beautiful, it adds that much more value to our experience when we engage with it. There's a reason why when people travel to different places across the world and they see masajid in cities like Istanbul, in cities like Doha, in cities like, Qahira, Cairo, in cities, Islamabad, and they see the masajid there and they pray in those masajid, there's a reason why people fall in love, because there's a certain level of beauty of ihsan that just is undeniable. And it almost makes it easier to pray because that the building, the facility is so beautiful, is filled with so much ihsan that you're like, yes, I would love to go and perform prayer in that area at that time, in this beautiful, marvelous building. So what about investing a little bit of time into our Quran copy to make sure that we pick something for the month of Ramadan that we can engage with on a daily basis, and that every time we open it, the look of it, the feel of it is something that makes us excited. It gets us in the mood. It makes us want to actually gain more. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us that. So my advice to everybody on how to build a relationship with the Quran is to understand the sequence of the Quran in your day, is to understand the fruit of the Quran that we can be harvesting, and to understand the value that we hold of the Quran in our life. And inshallah, we'll get to the point where it was described of one of the great companions, Ibn Mas'ud. They described him and they said that قرأ القرآن ثم وقف عنده وكفى به. That Ali, he described Mas'ud and he said that he used to read the Quran, and when he read it, he would stop and he would pause and he would reflect, and that would be enough for him. That would just be enough for him. He would open the book of Allah, the Kalam Allah, he would engage with the speech of Allah, and that would be enough for him. And I ask Allah to make the Quran enough for us. I hope not be the person on the Day of Judgment that Allah Ta'ala asks me, was my speech, was my book not enough for you? That you had to find meaning and purpose and pleasure and everything in other places, that you couldn't read it and engage with it. And really the answer for those of us who say it's not enough for us, I wonder if we've engaged with it and we've read it. Many of the people that I know who have left Islam, when I ask them, honestly, did you read the Quran? They say no. So it's time for us to start. And this month, the month of Ramadan, where Allah Ta'ala opens up our hearts, He takes away all the distractions, He takes away all the dunyawi glitter and glam that just takes our eyes away. It's the perfect time for us to engage with Quran. Okay? So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us that and to give us the ability to practice whatever we've heard. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. If anyone has any questions, then feel free. I'll be taking them on Instagram and on Clubhouse, inshallah. We'll have Batul and Ahad. We'll do questions for like 10, 15 minutes, inshallah. And then if you have any more questions, we're going to have a little bit of a quote-unquote secret session tonight with Sheikh Abdul Nasser Mufti Kamani, just low-key, just kind of out of nowhere. So if you have any questions, you can hop on there and ask, inshallah. But we'll do some right now. So if you have any questions on Clubhouse, you can go and raise your hand, or you can ask it on Instagram, inshallah.
Yeah, we just opened up raising hands on Clubhouse.
Okay. All right. So I got a good question here on Instagram. So while we got people on Clubhouse coming up, and I'll answer some on Instagram. First question is, would reading Quran in English during Ramadan have the same reward as reading it in Arabic? That's a really good question. So the Quran, reading the Quran, the reward of reading and reciting it is given when a person tries to read it in Arabic or does it in Arabic, because the Quran was sent down in Arabic. But remember, we talked about making sure that meaning was a part of the experience as well. Okay, meaning is a part of the experience. Like the Quran has its own beauty. It definitely has its own power just in its recitation alone. But the meaning of the Quran is the purpose of its being sent down. Okay, so the reward, when we talk about, scholars have talked about this, like what is more valuable, studying the Quran or reciting it? And they say that both of them are rewarded. Both of them are rewarded. The best case scenario, of course, is that you can read the Quran as it was sent and you can understand it and you can study it. That's the best case. But if you can't, which is fine, that's the majority of the ummah cannot, okay, then try, what I would do is to dedicate a little bit of time to each. Okay, so what I would recommend for you, for the person who's asking this great question, is try to read the half page of Quran in Arabic as much as you can. If you can't read it because Arabic is not easy for you, that's okay. You can sign up for a class, inshallah, and work on that over the coming year. Do your best, and then read the translation or study the meaning of the passage that you just read. Or if you can't read it, listen to it and follow along, inshallah. And Allah will reward the person who reads. Even if they stutter while reading, Allah rewards the person who reads, who struggles, right? And sometimes this happens to everybody. They're reading, they struggle. Allah rewards that person twice, while He rewards the person who reads fluently. He rewards that person once. So you get a great reward for struggling to read, even if you don't feel like confident in it. Allah Ta'ala will reward you, inshallah, with that. Ask Allah Ta'ala to accept this, inshallah. Ameen.
On Clubhouse, we have
yes.
Sister Sosan. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that.
Assalamualaikum.
Assalam.
So I wanted to actually get your opinion on whether you thought we should prioritize during the month of Ramadan reading the Quran from like cover to cover, even if that means we have to listen to someone or follow along with someone, or if we should instead spend time reading what we can read and understanding what we can understand. Because oftentimes people prioritize just like finishing it at least once, and not necessarily understanding it.
Yes, good point. again, this is an answer where there's going to be kind of like multiple layers to the answers. So the first answer I would say is, if a person can do both, if a person can read along or listen along with somebody, can follow along with their mushaf and also kind of study it as they're going along. So we did this last year with Qalam Institute. Every night we did 1 hour, and we were able to finish one juz every night, Arabic and English, in 1 hour. If a person can do that, that's like the best. Okay, if you can do that, I'm not saying with Qalam necessarily, but I'm saying in general. Okay, my mom is texting me right now and saying Allah also rewards you for listening to Quran. So yes, you do get rewarded for listening to Quran. But if you have to choose, Sausan, if you have to choose between, should I read it to finish it, or should I read it to study it? Then I have to go back to the statement of Ibn Abbas, where he says, لأن أقرأ البقرة في ليلة وتفكر فيها أحب إلي من أن أقرأ القرآن حضرمة, where he says that it would be more beloved to me, himself, that if I read Surah Al-Baqarah in one night and thought about it, he said that would be more beloved to me than just reading the Quran with quickness, with like a quick tongue. So that is the position that I hold personally. I know that there are some that talk about the barakah and completing the book, which of course is there's no doubt. But according to Sheikh Abdel Nasser, and if he's here right now, maybe he can even shed some light on this. If you guys see him, you can invite him up. It's more meaningful for a person to be able to derive meaning from the situation than it would be. Oh, there he is, mashallah. Than it would be for a person just to finish it for the sake of like ceremony. So, Sheikh, do you want to enlighten us on this, inshallah?
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, exactly what Ustad said. Even the previous question about, should I read or should I just be reading translation? So all of these different things have their own individual, they have their own benefits, their own rewards. So for instance, somebody who prioritizes reading the Quran just in Arabic, the entirety of it in the month of Ramadan, that's awesome. They get the reward of that. But they are lacking and missing the reward and the benefit of studying the meaning of it. They are missing that component. And likewise, vice versa, if someone, reads a little bit in Arabic and then is, largely prioritizing translation and meaning and reflection, maybe they're not fully getting the benefit of reading more in terms of quantity. So there's benefit in both, right? So it's, in a sense, it's not like you're losing something. That's what I wanted to emphasize. You're not necessarily missing out on something. You're not losing something because you're gaining something elsewhere. That's number one. Number two, if it is the kind of situation where someone's got, circumstances and maybe they're still earlier in their process of learning how to read the Quran, where they're going to have to very deliberately choose one thing over another, then as Ustad Abdurrahman just mentioned, this is my understanding. This is the understanding that I got from all the teachers that I studied and learned the Quran and the meaning of the Quran with, and some of whom were just remarkable scholars of the Quran. And that is the meaning, the understanding, the guidance from the Quran is the priority, and that's what should be prioritized. And you don't even have to take any person's opinion for it. We go and we look at what Allah said in the Quran himself. Shahr Ramadan, talking about the month of the Quran, alladhi unzila fihi al-Quran, the month in which the Quran was sent down, hudan lin-nasi, as guidance for all of humanity, for all of mankind. So you should, in that instant, prioritize understanding and meaning. Allah ta'ala, Allah knows best.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh. I really appreciate it. And then, the other thing that I'll add to sorry, Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh. I really appreciate it. The other thing that I'll just quickly add to everybody is that, you're making a decision in this moment, but that's not how it's going to be for the rest of your life, right? So what Sheikh Abdel Nasser is saying is exactly spot on, and I think I don't want to speak in front of him, but I think one thing he would say, based on that I know of him, is just get started. just get started. And then once you get started in this process, whether it's reciting or whether it's studying, you will find that you will be able to cover the other side eventually. But if I, there's almost like this phrase that they use. I'm not sure entirely how appropriate it is, but paralysis by analysis, that sometimes we get so caught in this, like, what's better, what should we do? And so I'm not saying this is you, but I fall victim to this quite often. And that is, trying to find the perfect solution instead of sometimes just getting started. And when I get started, what I realize is that neither solution was actually the perfect solution, but it was mostly somewhere in between. And Allah Ta'ala will give you barakah on your time. You'll be able to do that, inshallah. Okay. We have a question here on Instagram, which is like, what are some good tafsirs that you would recommend to understand? And there's a lot of people recommending some. I would recommend, obviously Ibn Kathir is really good for the historical references. I would recommend, Sayyid Qutb has one that's called In the Shade of the Quran. That's a lot more reflective. It's a little bit more deep if you're kind of looking for that. Obviously, Sheikh Abdul Nasser, who's here, he's doing his tafsir. Tafsir al-Jalalain, mashallah, Ryan Hillard is throwing in some deep recommendations. We have Tafsir Jalalain and Tafsir al-Qurtubi. He says they're both available in English if you look for them. But really, Sheikh Abdul Nasser, his specialization, his love, his focus, a lot of it revolves around tafsir. And so, Sheikh, do you want to recommend any sort of good explanation of Quran, maybe in English, that's accessible, that people here could go online and buy them right now? That way they'll have it in time for Ramadan.
Yeah, it's always a little bit kind of sometimes surprising and maybe even a little disheartening to some folks when we say that there's still a lot of room for growth for good tafsir material in English. And that's just simply because it's a newer endeavor, right? The translation of the Quran into the English language is about 100 years old, a little over 100 years old. So, when it comes to obviously Arabic is 1400 years it's been going on. In a language like Urdu, it's been going on for 400 or 500 years. In the Persian language, it's been going on for 1200 years. So it takes time to really develop really awesome resources. But as a quick start, there is an English translation of a very straightforward, easy explanation of the Quran. The English isn't fantastic, but it's serviceable if somebody wants to make use of it. It's called Understanding the Quran. Literally, that's what it's called, Tafhim al-Quran, Understanding the Quran. By Maulana Maududi, rahmallah. He was a scholar of India. That's one. There's another English translation that's a little bit more dense. It goes into a little bit more detail here and there sometimes, but it's still very, very beneficial. And it's called Ma'ariful Quran, the understandings from the Quran, but it's just called Ma'ariful Quran, spelled out in English, like transliterated. It's by another Indian scholar, Mufti Shafi Uthmani. And so those are two, Ma'ariful Quran, and number two is Understanding the Quran. Those are two to at least kind of get started with, and inshallah, hopefully we're able to start producing some good work.
Inshallah. And of course, Sheikh's not going to mention it, obviously, because he's here, but he does have many different tafsirs that have been recorded in totality. So if you want to pick one surah and follow it along, 30 days, Surah Taha, Surah Maryam, and others, and you can Google that on YouTube. Those are all free, of course. Tafhim al-Quran, I'm holding it up on Instagram, but also there's an abridged copy. It's a small copy. Mine is literally so old. SubhanAllah, when my wife and I first met, we used to actually call each other long distance and read together with this copy, SubhanAllah. So I have a lot of memories with it. And this is something, it's an abridged copy. It's published by the Islamic Foundation UK. You can get it on Amazon. And it's really, really great. It's a great little copy that you can read with. The footnotes are solid. So that's going back to what Sheikh Nasser mentioned. And he disappears. Okay, we'll take one more question. We'll take, two more. Sada and Naz. So I'm not sure which one was first. I think it was
Sada.
Sada. Okay, Sada. Go ahead, bismillah. Assalamu
alaikum. Barakallahu feek for this session. This is much needed. I have a question. So I struggle with my tajweed, and I've been trying to work on it. And so, is it okay to recite along? But I play the Quran in the background, is it okay to read along with that?
Okay, good question. So tajweed is obviously one of the important aspects of reciting Quran, be able to pronounce each thing correctly and to follow the recitation in a way that is correct as well. So just to explain for everybody what that is, it's the science of reciting Quran. Tajweed is the science of recitation of Quran. And the best way to learn tajweed, without a doubt, is with a tajweed teacher, because one-on-one with someone being able to recite back to you is really, really good, and to kind of point out, small mistakes that maybe you don't realize or recognize. This is something that, all of us have benefited from, and some at later ages than earlier. Like I myself just kind of, memorized younger based off of listening, and it wasn't until I had to sit and read to Sheikh Abdul Nasser and others where my mistakes were made more apparent. So that's the best way. But if you can't do that for whatever reason, then another really good way is what you mentioned, which is to listen and recite with or back and forth with a good reciter. I would recommend Sheikh Minshawi, Muhammad Siddiq Minshawi. He's an Egyptian reciter. He's no longer living, but his recitation is very nice, very clean, and it's on Spotify. So if you want to listen to it, you can listen to it there. Sheikh Minshawi, obviously Abdul Basit, Abdul Samad, rahimahullah, is another one. But Minshawi and Husari are like the two really clean tajweed that's going to like be awesome for you to listen to and to clean up whatever tajweed that you're trying to perfect, inshallah. Good question. Thank you so much.
I listen to Sheikh Mashari right now, but
okay,
thank you for the
he's good. I would recommend, the reciters that have very beautiful melody and tone. It's beautiful to listen to, but sometimes it's hard to
follow along,
to learn. Yeah, exactly. So yeah. Wait. All right, Sister Naz, assalamu alaikum.
Assalamualaikum. So my question is also similar to the sister that just asked about tajweed. So I can read Arabic, that's not a problem. So I can read the Quran. But I've been told before that if you can't read it with tajweed, then it's not good to read it.
Okay.
So,
so your question is like, is that accurate?
Yes.
So, okay, not accurate. The only time that a person should not read the Quran is if they are not in a state of wudu, and they are willfully neglecting it, then they should not read the Quran. But not having perfect tajweed is not an excuse for a person not to read the Quran. Of course not. Unless your words are like creating alternate meanings, then that's the only extreme example that I could think of. If a person's recitation is it's the inaccuracies are so far off that it's creating like opposite meanings. And so no, I would really recommend that you continue to read Quran absolutely as much as you can. And that's the only way your tajweed is going to improve, is by continuing to read. So maybe the person who told you that, maybe they meant well, and I'm not going to assume the worst, but I would highly disagree with that. And I would say that instead of telling someone to stop reading, what I would rather instead advise that person is keep it up, and maybe once a week you can read to somebody and have that person correct you in your Arabic. But as well, along with that, I really want to encourage everyone to, whatever they're reading in Arabic, that's awesome. And I want you to also, as Sheikh Abdul Nasser just said, try to make sure you couple that with the meaning of the passage, inshallah, as much as possible. Allahu A'lam.
Thank you. This was actually my Arabic teacher who told me this.
Oh,
but
okay.
Also, I just wanted to, something that helped me previously last Ramadan to finishing Quran on time during the 30 days was reading 4 pages after each salah.
There you go.
So yeah, if anyone else wants to use that, it's actually helpful. Thank you so much for responding.
Good job. Thank you. Yeah, so having a schedule like that is awesome. And inshallah, Roots is going to be providing a Ramadan schedule at the end of this series. We're going to have like a little graphic that's going to give people sort of like pro tips from the entire series, inshallah. So that'll be something that will go on there, inshallah, as well. Thank you, Sister Naz. Jazakumullah khairan. Everybody who joined us, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, or Clubhouse, barakallahu feekum, may Allah reward you, and may Allah ta'ala make us people who love the Quran, who listen to it, who read it, who think about it. And whenever we are caught in a situation in life, the Quran becomes the light that we need to see, and it becomes the air that we need to breathe, and it becomes the solution to all of our problems and the untangling of all of the knots that we have. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Barakallahu feekum, everybody. Inshallah, we will see everybody here next Wednesday for our next session, inshallah. And if you want to see all the sessions that we're doing, whether it's Monday Heart Work, whether it's these preparing for Ramadan sessions or anything else, then you can go ahead and click in any of the moderators' profiles, and you can join the Roots Community Club on Clubhouse, inshallah, and you can join and get those notifications. All of the books that have been mentioned, I'm going to tweet them in my book thread on my Twitter account. I have a pinned tweet. It's like a recommended English readings thread. I'm going to tweet them there, inshallah, for everybody. Okay? I'll get that updated later tonight. It's my daughter's birthday party, so I have to go downstairs and eat pizza. Okay. All right, everybody. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.